the US and China must broaden and deepen people-to-people relationships in order to help save the US-China bilateral relationship, person to person, human being to human being. Secretary of State Antony Blinken calls it one of the most important relationships in the world. A very well-known Chinese institute says it continues to be the most important relationship in the world. At the APEC meeting in November in San Francisco, President Biden and Chairman Xi, these two leaders reiterated the importance of ties between the people of the United States and the People's Republic of China. So these two leaders clearly understand the importance of people-to-people contact. We cannot overemphasize the significance of this relationship and its effect on the future of China, the future of the US, and the future of the rest of the world. Now, I've been involved with China for over 50 years. 25 of those years, I have actually lived in China. And I must say that I have never been so concerned about the US-China bilateral relationship as I am today. In this new era, the grievances and the disagreements just keep piling up. Let me give you some examples. The US complains that China is the most protectionist major trading country in the world. China, on the other hand, has an economic development model which has been very successful for the past 40 years. And so China justifies its policies by looking at this success. Another example, the US increasingly prohibits military-related and dual-use technology exports to China in the name of US national security. China says, no, you are prohibiting these exports because you're intending to stunt China's economic growth. A third example, overproduction of steel and aluminum in China is dumped in the US below cost. And the US says this is because of Chinese subsidies in these industries. And the US faces similar challenges with solar panels, with batteries, with electric cars. And the US says, well, this justifies us slapping tariffs on these products. Now, our Chinese friends claim that Chinese manufacturing competitiveness, efficiency, innovation result in better and cheaper products, and that US tariffs are protectionist. Now, let me augment these examples with three more quick examples of disagreements. China claims most of the South China Sea for itself, whereas the US And some of China's neighbors strongly disagree. Taiwan. The US and China agree. Taiwan is part of China. But the US and China strongly disagree on the how and the when of reunification. And a third example, our two great countries, China and the US, we view the war in Ukraine through very different prisms. The US accuses China of supporting Russia's war effort. And China, although China does have a no-limits partnership with Russia, China does not publicly provide any war material to Russia. Now, as these grievances and disagreements continue to simmer, I expect that the US-China bilateral relationship will continue to be contentious for the foreseeable future. So it is critical that the US and China broaden and deepen people-to-people relationships, nurturing firsthand mutual understanding and respect in order to save the US-China bilateral relationship, people-to-people, person-to-person, human being to human being. Now, at the November summit between President Biden and Chairman Xi, these two leaders also agreed to encourage student, business, and other exchanges. So let's take a look at how people-to-people exchanges are going in the area of students, business people, and tourists. Students. In 2019, there were 370,000 Chinese students in the US. This year, that number is down almost 25%. And one of the reasons is increased scrutiny of Chinese student visa applicants, depending on what they're studying and if they have suspected ties with China's military or intelligence. Now, for those students that do qualify to study in the US, we need to do everything we can to help them feel welcome. Now, American students in China, that number peaked in 2012. That was 15,000. That number today is 800. Now, during COVID, China's borders were all but closed to US students. Well, the pandemic is over, but American students are not returning in numbers to China. One of the reasons for that is a State Department travel warning that recommends that Americans reconsider travel to China due to arbitrary enforcement of local laws, which can include exit bans and unlawful detentions. Now, the Chinese call this travel warning completely reckless. And in response to fewer American students in China, Chairman Xi Jinping is personally encouraging 50,000 American students to come to China over the next 5 years. Now, for our part in America, we need to provide financial and other incentives to help our students learn more about the extraordinary world of Chinese language and culture. Let's look at the business contacts. Since the 1980s, American investment and trade has been a major catalyst for Chinese economic growth. But American investors are now more cautious about China. And just this last year, bilateral trade was down almost 20%. So in response to less investment and less trade, China is re-emphasizing its welcome to American businesses. Come to China, bring your investment, bring your technology. But now American businesses are more circumspect than they were in the past. In addition, although China officially welcomes American business people to come to China, China's security services continue to raid offices of foreign companies, detain employees of foreign firms, and relentlessly surveil foreign business people in China. So needless to say, people-to-people contacts in business are dwindling. Let's look at tourism. Tourism has been a boon for both countries for broadening people-to-people mutual understanding. But of course, the brakes were put on tourism during the pandemic. The pandemic's over, but travel between the US and China is still way, way below pre-pandemic levels. One issue is the cost of airline tickets. Now, those sky-high airline ticket prices during COVID have come down, but I still have to pay about twice what I paid to get to China, twice what I paid before COVID. The number of flights is also an issue. In 2019, there were 315 flights between the US and China in a week. The following year, 2020, there were 4. Now, again, the pandemic is over, but scheduled flights between the US and China is still only at 15% of pre-COVID levels. So whether we're talking about students, business, or tourists, people-to-people trend is for less rather than more. So what can you do about it? Well, I recommend that you strongly support organizations that promote US-China people-to-people relations. Some groups that I have worked with include the US-China Education Exchange, the US-China Business Council, the National Committee on US-China Relations, American Chambers of Commerce in Beijing, Shanghai, South China. You can make a difference. Now, in conclusion, there are thousands of Americans and Chinese that know each other. But we need millions and millions in order to help save the US-China bilateral relationship. People to people, person to person, human being to human being.